Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're going to be talking about something that literally affects every single one of us, and that's air pollution.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, how it impacts our respiratory health. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources here, everything from some academic papers to some public health guides. So we're going to try to make this really approachable and understandable to everybody.
Yeah.
But we're going to learn some pretty surprising things about the air we breathe.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me right away when I was reading through this material, was the WHO, the World Health Organization,
Right.
calling air pollution the new tobacco.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful comparison, don't you think?
It is. It's an image that sticks with you, right? It
Yeah.
makes you think about it.
Yeah.
And then, we've also got this story about this 8-year-old girl in China who's been diagnosed with lung cancer. And they're directly attributing it to air pollution there.
I know. That's just heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. And it just drives home the point that this is serious stuff,
7 million.
7 million deaths annually.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around a number that big. That's what the World Health Organization is estimating. And you're telling me 91% of the world's population is breathing in air that exceeds their guidelines.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we're all in this together then, aren't we?
We are. We all share the same air, and that's why this is such a global issue, and it demands our attention.
It does. It does. So I guess let's start maybe by just sort of breaking down what's actually this air that we're breathing. And the sources actually get pretty specific talking about different types of pollutants. There's this visual that I really liked where they actually compare the size of particles like PM10 and PM2.5
Right.
to a human hair. And it really puts things in perspective.
I love that visual. It's so powerful, right? Because it really helps you understand just how small some of these particles are. I mean, think about it. The smaller the particle, the further it can travel into your lungs, maybe even into your bloodstream. It's those PM2.5s, that tiny stuff, that's really causing the most trouble.
Right. Yeah, and so I guess I'm starting to understand why size matters so much.
It does.
And then there's also this, we have to think about primary pollutants, right?
Right.
The stuff that comes directly from sources like cars and factories.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the secondary pollutants, the ones that sort of form in the atmosphere.
Right.
So it's almost like, baking a cake. You've got the basic ingredients, but then they react with each other and they can create something completely different.
That's a great analogy. It's like you're taking those basic ingredients, those primary pollutants, and then they're reacting with each other in the air. Sometimes sunlight's involved. And they can create something new and potentially more harmful, the secondary pollutants. It's all chemistry, really.
So it's not just about what's coming out of the tailpipe. It's about what happens to it once it's out there in the air.
Exactly. It gets pretty complex, and it can be hard to track where things come from, how things change over time.
So the sources highlight a really long list of health impacts that are associated with air pollution, and it's not just respiratory issues. There's heart disease, stroke, diabetes,
Cognitive decline, even.
Yeah,
it affects the brain.
It's incredible. There are a couple of things that really surprised me though, like air pollution and weaker bones.
Oh yeah.
And problems with digestion. I never would have thought there was a connection.
Yeah, those are the ones that jumped out at me too. Like, what? How does that even work?
Right.
But the thing is, it all comes back to those tiny, tiny PM2.5 particles. They can travel throughout your whole body, causing inflammation, damage wherever they go. It's like little ninjas wreaking havoc in your system.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Ninja particles. I got it.
Yes.
So we know that air pollution can affect lots of different parts of the body, but let's focus on what it does to our lungs. Asthma, for example, that's a huge problem. It affects millions of people worldwide.
Yeah.
And the sources are linking, rising asthma rates, particularly in developing nations,
Right.
to increase air pollution.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the development of asthma, but it's also about what triggers those asthma attacks.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. I mean, those little ninja particles, they can inflame the airways. They can make them more sensitive. And so when someone with asthma is exposed to these pollutants, it can trigger an attack.
And what about ozone? Ozone, that's part of smog, right?
Right, yeah.
I always thought ozone was a good thing, protecting us from the sun up high in the atmosphere.
Yeah. It is. Up high.
But it's not so good down here.
Not so much. It's all about location. Ozone high up, yeah, it protects us from the sun's harmful UV rays. But down here, it irritates our airways, makes them overreact to things.
So we got to watch out for ozone as well. And it seems like children and the elderly, they're hit the hardest when it comes to air pollution-induced asthma.
Yeah, they are. Because their respiratory systems are either still developing or they might be weaker due to age.
Makes you think about the little ones, the older folks in our lives.
It does, it does.
And then there's COPD.
Yeah.
chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or
Mhm.
COPD. And this is already, I mean, this is scary stuff. This is the third leading cause of death globally.
It is scary stuff. And what makes it even scarier is that it's not just a problem for people living in those heavily polluted cities.
Right.
Even people in the suburbs are experiencing negative health effects. We all need to be paying attention to this.
Wow. So no one's really immune to this.
Not really, no.
That's pretty sobering thought.
It is, and it really underscores the need for us to understand this, to understand air pollution, and take steps to protect ourselves. Makes you wonder, what else is out there? Stuff we don't even know about yet.
It's like a whole hidden world of pollutants just waiting to be discovered. Yeah, it is kind of unsettling. But I guess knowledge is power, right?
Speaking of knowledge, the sources mention all these different standards and indexes for measuring air quality. There's this thing called the PSI, the Pollutant Standards Index, which sounds like something out of like a science fiction movie.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's not quite science fiction, but it is a little bit outdated.
Yeah.
That was actually how Taiwan used to measure air quality.
Oh, okay.
But the problem was it didn't really account for PM 2.5, which, as we've discussed, is one of those major players in all these health issues.
So they needed a new system.
They did.
Yeah.
Enter the DQI.
The Daily Air Quality Index.
Yes, specifically for PM 2.5.
Okay.
Based on a system they use in the UK. Didn't they have like problems with that system sometimes going into like the purple zone?
Oh, you're remembering the purple air phenomenon?
Yeah.
That's when the DQI would hit its highest level. It
Yeah.
would trigger all these alerts.
Right.
But Taiwan eventually combined the PSI and the DQI into a single index,
Okay.
the AQI,
The Air Quality Index.
which is what they use today.
So no more purple air days. That's got to be a good thing, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Oh.
The AQI still has a purple level, and it's actually reserved for even higher concentrations of PM 2.5 than before. So it's not that the air is cleaner, it's just a different scale.
Okay. So purple is still bad news no matter what system we're using.
Purple is bad.
The sources explain this whole color-coded system, right?
Yeah.
So we got green. Green is good.
Green is good.
Yellow is moderate. Orange means sensitive groups who should be cautious.
Mhm.
Red means everyone should be concerned. And then purple. Well, purple means it's time to break out the serious masks, I guess.
Exactly. The AQI is a really valuable tool, I think, for understanding just at a glance what the air quality level is, and then you can take the appropriate precautions.
One thing that struck me is that there are standards for indoor air quality too, which I
Yeah.
never really thought about before. And apparently our homes and workplaces can be full of all sorts of pollutants, dust, chemicals from cleaning products, even mold.
Oh yeah, even cooking
Right.
releases pollutants into the air, and if a space isn't well ventilated, those pollutants can build up and they can actually reach levels that can affect our health.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we can't just focus on what's happening outside. We need to pay attention to the air we're breathing inside too. So we've talked about what's in the air and how we measure it, but let's get back to those health impacts for a minute, because the sources really go into detail about how air pollution is messing with our bodies, and it's not a pretty picture.
No, it's not. It's like this domino effect. Those tiny particles, especially those PM 2.5s.
Right.
They can actually enter your bloodstream and travel throughout your whole body.
Yeah.
They cause inflammation, they cause damage wherever they go. And the research is very clear. Air pollution is a major contributor to cardiovascular disease.
Heart attacks, strokes.
All sorts of serious problems.
Yeah, that's scary. And it's not just about how much pollution we breathe in. It's also about what kind of pollution it is.
Right, exactly. Different pollutants have different effects on the body, and so sometimes it can be difficult to tease those apart, but it's like you're being exposed to a toxic cocktail with each ingredient adding to the damage.
It's a complex problem with complex consequences.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before, some people are just more vulnerable than others.
They are.
Children, elderly, people with existing health conditions,
Yeah.
they're all at greater risk.
Absolutely, because their bodies are either still developing or might be weaker, and that makes them more susceptible to those harmful effects of air pollution. We got to be really mindful, especially when it comes to protecting those who are most vulnerable.
Yeah. It's a lot to take in, to be honest.
It is.
It can feel overwhelming. But we can't just bury our heads in the sand and ignore it, can we?
We can't.
We need to know what we're dealing with so that we can take action.
I completely agree. Knowledge is power, and understanding those risks is the first step towards protecting ourselves and those we care about.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what we can do to protect ourselves. And the sources have some pretty practical advice. And masks seem to be a big part of the solution.
They are. Masks can be a really great first line of defense against all that particulate matter.
Okay.
But it's important to choose the right mask. The sources actually break down all those different types of masks and how effective they are.
It's confusing, though, because you've got cloth masks, You've got surgical masks, you've got N95s. What's the difference?
Okay, so those simple masks, like your cloth masks and surgical masks, they're really mostly good for blocking those larger particles,
Okay.
the droplets. If somebody sneezes on you, that kind of thing.
Right.
But if you really want to get those tiny PM 2.5 particles, you need something more, and that's where those N95 respirators come in. That's the one that's really going to filter out those tiny PM 2.5 particles that are causing all the trouble.
But they're not exactly comfortable to wear, are they?
No, you're right. They can get a little stuffy, a little, not the most fashionable accessory. But when the air quality is really bad, especially if you're in one of those high-risk groups that we talked about,
Right.
the protection that they offer is totally worth the little bit of discomfort.
Yeah.
You're going to be happy you have it.
And I remember you mentioning that Taiwan actually has this certification program for masks, which sounds like a really great idea for consumers.
Yeah, it means that you can look for that certification label and know that that mask has been tested and that it meets certain quality standards.
Right. So that's really helpful.
Mhm.
Okay, so masks are one tool in the toolbox. What about air purifiers? Do they really make a difference?
They can, especially if you're spending a lot of time indoors. Those air purifiers, especially the ones with those HEPA filters, can be very effective at removing particulate matter from the air. It's like having a little clean air factory in your home.
I love that.
Yeah.
But there are so many different types of air purifiers on the market. Like, how do you know which one to choose?
That's true. There are a lot of choices out there, but there are a few things you can look for.
Okay.
One is the CADR.
The clean air delivery rate.
Yes. It basically tells you how much air that purifier can clean in a certain amount of time. The higher the CADR, the better.
Okay.
And then you want to look at the filters themselves. There are different types. The HEPA filters are the most common.
Right.
But you've also got activated carbon filters. Oh, right.
So HEPA filters are great for those particles, while activated carbon filters are better at absorbing gases and odors.
Okay.
So some air purifiers will have both types of filters, which can give you, a little bit more comprehensive protection.
Right. So air purifiers can help, but the sources, they're pretty clear that they're not a perfect solution. They can't filter everything, right?
Right.
And they only work in enclosed spaces.
That's true. They're a good tool to have, but they're not going to solve the problem of air pollution altogether. We have to think bigger than that.
Right. Which brings us back to that bigger question, I guess, of how we create a cleaner, healthier future for everyone.
Exactly. And that's a big challenge, but it's one we have to face.
It's a daunting task, but we got to start somewhere.
We do. And it's going to take a collective effort,
Yeah.
both on an individual level and a societal level.
Right.
We need to be aware of the problem. We need to take steps to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need to be advocating for cleaner air policies. Absolutely. Speaking of taking steps, the sources mentioned a few other, little things we can do, like checking the AQI before heading outside.
Right.
Avoiding strenuous activity when pollution levels are high.
Those are good tips.
Common sense stuff, but important.
Definitely. And I'd add that, choosing eco-friendly transportation options whenever possible can make a difference too.
Walking, biking, taking public transit.
Exactly. Every little bit helps.
It all comes down to just being mindful.
Be mindful, yeah.
Of the air we breathe and making choices that support a healthier environment for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. We all have a right to breathe clean air, and it's up to us to work together to make that a reality.
Okay. So we've talked about this general impact of air pollution on respiratory health, but let's take a closer look at some specific conditions, starting with asthma. The sources really dive into how air pollution is both, a major trigger and even a contributing factor to the development of the disease.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering when you think about it. 300 million people globally are affected by asthma.
I know.
And that number is on the rise, especially in areas with high levels of air pollution.
I remember reading that statistic. It's alarming. And what's really concerning is that children seem to be particularly vulnerable.
They are. Their lungs are still developing, so they're more susceptible to the damaging effects of those air pollutants. And, we've already talked about how those tiny particles can cause inflammation in the airways, making them more sensitive and more prone to those asthma attacks.
Right. And there's ozone, too.
Oh, yeah.
Which can also trigger those attacks. So it's like a double whammy if you've got, both particulate matter and ozone in the air.
It is. It's like a 1-2 punch to the lungs. And for people with asthma, even short-term exposure to those pollutants can have a really significant impact. It can lead to wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath. It can even lead to hospitalization.
It's just a reminder that air pollution is not just this abstract concept. It's a real and present danger.
It is.
That can really impact people's lives.
And it's something we need to take seriously, both as individuals and as a society.
So what can people with asthma do to protect themselves? I mean, the sources talk about, masks and air purifiers and avoiding high pollution areas. Are there any other strategies?
Well, it's really important for people with asthma to work closely with their doctor, to manage their condition. That might include taking medication as prescribed, having a good asthma action plan in place, and just being really aware of what triggers their symptoms.
So it's about being proactive and taking control of your own health.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, reducing exposure to air pollution is key. That means checking those air quality conditions, staying indoors on those high pollution days, and using those masks and those air purifiers when you need to.
It sounds like a lot of work, but it's essential.
It is.
You're protecting your health.
And for people with asthma, it can literally be the difference between breathing easily and struggling to breathe.
Now let's shift gears and talk about another respiratory disease that's heavily impacted by air pollution. That's COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The sources paint a pretty grim picture of this condition and its global impact.
Yeah, COPD is a serious lung disease. It makes it difficult to breathe, and it's a huge problem worldwide. It's the third leading cause of death globally, and it's projected to become even more prevalent in the coming years.
Those are really sobering statistics, and it sounds like air pollution is playing a big role in the development and progression of COPD.
It absolutely is. That long-term exposure to air pollutants, especially those particulate matter and ozone, can damage the lungs and lead to COPD. And even short-term exposure can worsen symptoms for people who already have it. It can even trigger exacerbations, which are those flare-ups of the disease.
So it's a double threat. Air pollution can contribute to the development of COPD in the first place, and then it can make the condition worse for people who already have it.
Right. And it's really important to remember that smoking is also a major risk factor for COPD. In fact, smoking is the leading cause of COPD.
So if you smoke and you're worried about COPD, quitting is essential.
It is absolutely essential.
Well,
quitting smoking is the single most important thing you can do to protect your lungs and reduce your risk of developing COPD.
And what about people who already have COPD?
Yeah.
What can they do to protect themselves from air pollution?
Well, same advice applies. Be aware of those air quality conditions. Stay indoors on those high pollution days. Use those masks and those air purifiers when you need to. And again, work closely with your doctor, to manage your condition, develop an action plan for dealing with those exacerbations.
It sounds like a lot of responsibility kind of falls on individuals to protect themselves.
Right.
But shouldn't there be more being done at like a societal level
Absolutely.
to address this?
Individual actions are really important, but we also need those systemic changes.
Right.
We need those stricter regulations on industrial emissions. We need investments in clean energy technologies, and we need policies that really promote that sustainable transportation.
It sounds like a tall order.
It is. It is a tall order.
But it's essential.
It is.
It's essential for protecting public health, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Clean air is a fundamental human right, and we need to work together to make sure that everyone has access to it.
Let's turn our attention now to a particularly frightening link between air pollution and lung cancer. The sources highlight the growing body of evidence that connects these two factors.
Yeah. Lung cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer-related deaths worldwide. And while smoking is still that primary risk factor,
Right.
air pollution is increasingly being recognized as a significant contributor, especially in those who've never smoked.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that case we talked about earlier, that 8-year-old girl in China who was diagnosed with lung cancer, and air pollution was suspected to be the cause.
That case was really a wake-up call. It showed that air pollution can have really devastating health consequences, even for young children who've never been exposed to tobacco smoke.
So it's a reminder that air pollution, it doesn't discriminate.
Doesn't discriminate.
It can affect anyone, regardless of age or lifestyle.
Exactly. And the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer,
Right.
they've classified outdoor air pollution as a Group 1 carcinogen, which puts it in the same category as tobacco smoke.
Wow.
And asbestos.
So that's serious. So breathing polluted air is considered a proven cause of cancer.
It is.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
It is. And the evidence is mounting that air pollution is a significant contributor to lung cancer cases worldwide.
So how does it work? I mean, how does air pollution actually contribute to the development of lung cancer?
Well, think about it. Air pollution contains all these harmful substances.
Right.
You've got particulate matter, ozone, you've got all these different gases. And when those pollutants enter the lungs, they can actually damage your DNA. They can trigger inflammation. They can suppress the immune system.
And all of those things can increase the risk of cancer.
Exactly. It's like setting the stage for cancer to develop.
The sources mention that particulate matter, especially PM2.5,
Yeah.
is sort of a major culprit in in air pollution-related lung cancer.
It is. Those tiny particles can penetrate deep into the lungs.
Right.
They can even enter the bloodstream. And they've been linked to DNA damage, oxidative stress, and inflammation, all of which can increase that risk of lung cancer.
So it's not just about how much pollution we breathe in, but it's also about the type of pollution.
Yeah.
And how deep it travels into our bodies.
Exactly. And research has shown that long-term exposure to air pollution, especially particulate matter, is associated with a higher risk of dying from lung cancer.
That's just it's scary
It
to
is.
think that something we breathe in
Yeah.
could be contributing to such a
An
serious.
often fatal
Yeah.
disease.
It is scary, but
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that we're not powerless in this. We can take steps to protect ourselves. We can reduce our exposure to air pollution.
And speaking of protection, let's revisit that topic of masks. The sources provide a really detailed breakdown of different mask types and their effectiveness in filtering out, these air pollutants.
Masks can be a valuable tool, especially for people who are, particularly sensitive or those who live in those areas with high levels of pollution.
It can be overwhelming, though, trying to choose the right mask. I mean, there are just so many different options available. It's true. It can be really overwhelming, but I think the sources do a good job of breaking down those different types and explaining, the pros and cons of each.
They kind of differentiate between, those basic masks, like those cloth masks, and those surgical masks,
Right.
which primarily, protect against those larger particles and droplets.
Right.
And then those more specialized masks, like those N95 respirators,
Right.
which are really designed to filter out those fine particles, including PM2.5.
Exactly. Yeah. For general protection against, dust and droplets, maybe if somebody sneezes on you, a cloth mask or a surgical mask might be sufficient. But if
Yeah.
you're really concerned about that air pollution,
Right.
especially those particulate matter,
Right.
then that N95 respirator is really the way to go.
And those of us that have to fit really snugly around the face.
They do. Yeah, they have to create a seal to prevent that unfiltered air from leaking in. And it's important to make sure that you're choosing an N95 that's certified by a reputable organization.
Right, right. And I remember you mentioning that Taiwan has a certification program for masks.
Yes, they do. And it's a great program. They set, really high standards for that filtration efficiency. So you can be confident that a certified mask is going to provide that adequate protection.
Okay. So that's really helpful. So masks are one way to reduce our exposure to air pollution. But the sources also talk about air purifiers as a helpful tool, especially for improving indoor air quality.
Yeah. Those air purifiers with those HEPA filters can be really effective at removing particulate matter from the air in your home or your office. It's like having a little clean air zone where you can breathe easy.
I'm definitely thinking about getting an air purifier for my home, but I'm a little overwhelmed by all the different options. Like what should I be looking for?
Well, one really important factor is the CADR.
The clean air delivery rate.
Yes, that tells you how much air the purifier can clean in a certain amount of time. So higher CADR is better.
Okay.
And then you want to think about the different types of filters. We talked about HEPA filters, but you also have activated carbon filters.
What?
HEPA filters are good at trapping those particles, but those activated carbon filters are better at absorbing those gases and odors. So some air purifiers will actually have both types of filters, and that can give you a little more comprehensive protection.
So it sounds like air purifiers can be a helpful tool, but they're not a magic bullet.
You're right. They're not a magic bullet. They can't filter everything, and they only work in those enclosed spaces.
Right.
So we still need to be thinking about that bigger picture of addressing air pollution at its source.
Speaking of addressing it at the source, the sources also mentioned some less conventional approaches to mitigating the effects of air pollution. Things like nutritional supplements.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any evidence to support that?
It's still an area of ongoing research, but there are some promising findings.
Okay.
Certain nutrients like antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids may actually help protect against that oxidative stress and that inflammation that's caused by air pollution.
So it's not a cure-all.
Right.
But it might offer some additional protection.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it highlights the importance of that holistic approach.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about reducing our exposure. We need to be supporting those policies that promote clean air. And we maybe even need to be thinking about incorporating those strategies like dietary changes that might offer some protective benefit.
Okay, so it's a multifaceted problem.
It is.
That requires a multifaceted solution.
Exactly. We need to be thinking about individual actions, societal changes, and maybe even those potential lifestyle modifications. All of those things can help us mitigate those negative effects of air pollution.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how air pollution impacts our lungs specifically, but the sources also delve into its effects on other organ systems.
Yeah, it's really quite fascinating and a little bit scary just how interconnected our bodies are, you know?
Right.
When we breathe in polluted air, it's not just our lungs that suffer. Those pollutants can travel throughout the body and they can impact virtually every organ system.
So that's a pretty sobering thought. Where do we start? I mean, what are some of the key areas where air pollution is really wreaking havoc, beyond the lungs?
Well, one of the most concerning areas is the cardiovascular system.
The heart,
The heart.
blood vessels.
Yeah. I remember the sources were talking about that link between air pollution and heart attacks and strokes.
Yeah, those are scary.
They are. You know, it's those tiny particles again, those PM 2.5s.
Uh-huh.
They can actually enter the bloodstream and they cause inflammation in those blood vessels. And the inflammation can lead to plaque buildup. And that narrows the arteries and restricts blood flow.
And when blood flow is restricted, that's when you start to see those problems like heart attacks and strokes.
Exactly. It's like this chain reaction, you know?
Yeah.
You breathe in those pollutants, they get into your bloodstream, they cause inflammation that leads to plaque buildup, and then you have those blockages that can lead to some really serious life-threatening conditions.
It's just frightening to think that something we breathe in can have such a profound impact
I know.
on our heart health.
It is. It really is. And it highlights the importance of taking this seriously, even if you don't have any existing respiratory problems.
Right. What about the brain? These sources mention some pretty disturbing links between air pollution and neurological problems.
Yeah, that's still an area of really active research.
Okay.
But the evidence is mounting that air pollution can really have a detrimental effect on brain health.
They mention a link to stroke, which we just talked about.
Mhm.
But they also highlight a possible connection to neurodegenerative diseases
Oh, yeah.
like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Yeah, those are the ones that really caught my attention too. It's scary to think that air pollution might actually be contributing to these really devastating diseases.
And how is it thought to work? I mean, how does air pollution actually affect the brain?
Well, it's those tiny particles again. You know,
Yeah.
they can actually cross what's called the blood-brain barrier.
So they're like little ninjas sneaking past security and wreaking havoc in the brain.
They are. And once they're in the brain, they can trigger inflammation. They can trigger oxidative stress. They can damage brain cells and disrupt normal brain function.
It's a reminder that air pollution is not just an environmental issue.
It's not.
It's a health issue that can impact, virtually every aspect of our well-being.
Exactly. And we need to be talking about it more. We need to be raising awareness, and we need to be demanding action to protect our health and the health of future generations.
Absolutely. The sources also delve into the impact of air pollution on the endocrine system,
Yeah.
which is responsible for producing and regulating all those hormones.
Yes. Hormones are those chemical messengers that really control so many vital functions in the body, from growth and development to metabolism and reproduction. And air pollution can really disrupt this delicate balance.
They mention a link between air pollution and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes,
Right.
which is a condition where you have high blood sugar levels.
Yeah, and air pollution can interfere with what's called insulin sensitivity,
Oh.
which is basically how well your body's cells respond to insulin.
Right.
And insulin is that hormone that helps regulate blood sugar. So when that insulin sensitivity is impaired, it can lead to a buildup of glucose in the blood, which can eventually lead to type 2 diabetes.
So air pollution is essentially messing with our body's ability to regulate blood sugar.
It is. And it's not just diabetes. Air pollution has also been linked to problems with thyroid function,
Okay.
with reproductive health, even with stress hormone levels.
Wow. So it's disrupting our hormones.
It is.
Left and right.
Left and right. It
Yeah.
is. It's a reminder that the effects of air pollution really do extend far beyond just our lungs.
Yeah.
It's a whole body issue
Yeah.
that we need to take seriously.
The sources also discuss the impact of air pollution on the reproductive system.
Both for men and women, actually. It's a sensitive topic.
It is.
But it's one that's really important to address.
Absolutely.
Because air pollution has been linked to reduced fertility in both men and women.
Really?
Yeah. Studies have shown that exposure to air pollution can damage sperm quality, it can reduce egg production, and it can even interfere with hormone production.
That's really concerning because it's not just about our own health. It's about the health of future generations.
It is. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren. We have a responsibility to protect not only ourselves, but the health of those who come after us. And creating a cleaner, healthier environment is a crucial part of that responsibility.
Absolutely. The sources also highlight the impact of air pollution on the immune system.
Yeah.
which is, our body's defense against infection and disease.
That's a big one. Our immune systems are constantly working to protect us, from all those harmful invaders out there, those bacteria and viruses. But air pollution can actually weaken our defenses. It can make us more susceptible to illness.
So it's like air pollution is sabotaging our own internal army.
I like that analogy. It
Yeah.
is. Those air pollutants can damage immune cells, they can impair their function, and they can really disrupt the delicate balance of the immune system.
So not only are we breathing in these harmful substances, but we're also weakening our body's ability to fight them off.
Yeah, it's a double whammy. And it's especially concerning for those vulnerable populations.
Right.
Like children, the elderly, those with pre-existing health conditions. Their immune systems might already be compromised, and then this just adds another layer of difficulty.
And what about autoimmune diseases?
Oh, yeah.
Those conditions where the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues. The source has mentioned a possible link there as well.
It's still an emerging area of research, but there is growing evidence that air pollution might actually trigger or exacerbate autoimmune diseases.
Really?
Yeah, the thinking is that those air pollutants can kind of disrupt that delicate balance of the immune system, and that can make it more likely to attack those healthy tissues.
So some air pollution might be playing a role in a whole host of immune-related problems.
Yeah.
It's kind of alarming how far-reaching its effects seem to be.
It is, and it really reinforces the need to be proactive about protecting ourselves and advocating for those cleaner air policies.
Absolutely. Moving on to the digestive system.
Yeah.
The sources delve into how air pollution can actually disrupt the delicate balance of our gut microbiome.
Oh, yeah. That gut microbiome is just fascinating.
It is.
It's this complex ecosystem of trillions of bacteria that live in our intestines.
Right.
And they play such a crucial role in our overall health. I mean, they influence everything from digestion and immunity to even mental health and our risk of those chronic diseases.
So when air pollution disrupts the gut microbiome, it's not just our digestive health that's affected.
Yeah, not at all. It can have like these ripple effects
Wow.
throughout the whole body. And the sources highlight a link between air pollution and an increased risk of developing inflammatory bowel diseases.
Like Crohn's disease and
Yeah.
ulcerative colitis.
Exactly. And those are, really serious chronic conditions that can cause a lot of pain and discomfort.
So while air pollution isn't the only factor involved, in those diseases, it's certainly something we need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
It's like air pollution is attacking us on multiple fronts.
It is.
It's impacting not just our respiratory health,
Mm-hmm.
but our gut health as well.
It's a good way to think about it. It's a reminder that the effects of air pollution are so widespread.
Yeah.
And they're all interconnected.
The sources also touch on the impact of air pollution on the skeletal system,
Oh, yeah.
our bones.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was surprised by this one. I never would have thought there was a connection.
I know. It's not something people typically think about. But air pollution can actually weaken bones.
Really?
Yeah. And it can increase that risk of fractures.
Wow. And how does that work?
Well, those air pollutants can actually interfere with the body's ability to absorb calcium,
Oh, right.
which is, essential for building and maintaining strong bones.
Right.
And they can also trigger inflammation and oxidative stress, which can damage those bone cells.
So it's like air pollution is chipping away at our bones from the inside out.
That's a good analogy. And this is particularly concerning for older adults who are already at an increased risk of osteoporosis, that condition where the bones become weak and brittle.
So air pollution is yet another risk factor.
It is.
That older adults need to be aware of. It's a reminder that we really need to be protecting our bone health throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And that includes taking steps to reduce our exposure to air pollution.
Now let's talk about something that might be a little closer to home for some of us.
Okay.
The impact of air pollution on our skin.
Ah, yes, the skin, our largest organ. Our first line of defense against the outside world. And unfortunately, air pollution can take its toll. It can lead to premature aging. It can even lead to skin diseases.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I know that air pollution can cause wrinkles, age spots.
It's true. Those air pollutants can actually penetrate the skin's protective barrier.
Wow.
And that triggers inflammation and oxidative stress. And that can damage those skin cells and accelerate that aging process. It's like air pollution is stealing our youthful glow.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about wrinkles and age spots, right? The sources mention a link between air pollution and an increased risk of skin cancer.
That's right. Those air pollutants can damage that DNA. They can weaken the skin's immune defenses, and that can increase the risk of skin cancer development.
Wow. So not only is air pollution making us look older, but it might also be increasing our risk of a really serious disease.
It is. It's a good reminder to be mindful of those air quality conditions and to take steps to protect our skin, especially when those pollution levels are high.
Okay. What about our eyes? I mean, they're constantly exposed to the elements.
They are, and air pollution can definitely irritate and damage our eyes. We're talking dryness, redness, itching. It can even increase that risk of eye infections.
I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah.
When the air quality is bad, my eyes feel, gritty.
Yeah.
Irritated.
It's a common problem. Those air pollutants, especially those particulate matter and ozone, can really irritate those delicate tissues of the eyes. And that causes that inflammation and that discomfort. And over time, that exposure can even lead to more serious problems like cataracts.
Wow. It's amazing. And a little bit scary.
It is.
How many different parts of our body
That's amazing.
are affected by air pollution?
It really underscores the importance of taking this issue seriously and doing everything we can to protect ourselves and advocate for that cleaner air.
So we've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive. We've explored the different types of air pollutants.
We have
how they're measured and the wide-ranging health impacts from our lungs to our hearts to our brains, endocrine systems, immune systems, digestive systems, our bones, our skin, even our eyes. It's a lot.
It is. It's a lot. But I think the key takeaway here is that air pollution is a serious threat to our health. But knowledge is power, and by understanding those risks and taking those steps to protect ourselves, we can make a real difference.
I think that's a great point to end on. We don't want to leave people feeling overwhelmed and helpless. We want to empower them to take action. So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned something valuable, and we really encourage you to continue exploring this important topic.
Absolutely. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, breathe easy.
That's all for today's episode. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.